provide some exclusive information on the Russian invasion of the Ukraine based on my time in Russia. In 1990, Vladimir Putin returned to Russia from Germany as a KGB lieutenant colonel. 1 year later, Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev dissolved the Russian Empire. Putin was not happy and has spent the last 20 plus years trying to reacquire those lost nations. The Ukraine is the latest, but certainly not the last attempt to do so. In the late 1990s, the FBI sent me to Russia on several occasions on diplomatic training missions. It was a time when Putin was the prime minister under Boris Yeltsin. I got to shake hands with Putin as he wrapped up a meeting with FBI Director Louis Freeh in Moscow. We nodded hello, and that was it. But I did spend weeks with Russian flag officers, GRU intel officers, and former KGB agents. I'll talk about this in a few minutes, but the Ukrainian invasion is a worn-out tale of history repeating itself, and America and its allies are heading down that minefield of appeasement once more. This is what Russia, no longer the USSR, looked like when I arrived a decade after the fall of the empire. Now, if you look closely to the west, you'll see the Ukraine and countries like Germany, Romania, Poland, and the Baltic states a little bit north of there, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. To the south, you'll see Kazakhstan and the other stands, who are no longer part of the Russian Empire. So basically, Russia is now surrounded by a bunch of either NATO countries or NATO-leaning countries or democratic countries. It was a big deal to have FBI agents in Russia working with their intelligence officers, and the Russian newspapers carried it. You could see on the top left Special Agent Joe Pistone, the real-life Donnie Brasco, and then you could see me in the middle square getting ready to teach a class. Now, obviously, if Russian KGB agents arrived at New York City, the FBI would have around-the-clock surveillance, we'd have their rooms bugged, we'd have their luggage checked, and that's exactly what the Russians did to us. But we were aware of it, and what the Russians did is they sent an assortment of former KGB agents and military, GRU, which is military intelligence, and federal police officers to our class. In the top left photograph, you can see me handing out some study aids to the Russian military officers. And to the top right, you see a gentleman standing there. He's an interesting fellow. He is a general who is in charge of the Tumen, Siberia area, which has all the natural resources, the gas and oil in Russia. So he's a very, very important individual. We'll get to him in a little bit. The classes that we were conducting is how to combat organized crime and covert operations. And if you really think about it, Russia had no need to combat organized crime because the government was either getting a piece of the action or could just whack them off. So we were teaching them techniques on how to infiltrate organized crimes networks. The Russians did a good job in propaganda on us. They wanted to show their superiority militarily and in other ways. You can see in the top left photo on the extreme left, flanked by a lieutenant colonel and then the Russian general, and there's Joe Pistone we're surrounding the two gentlemen in uniform. On the right, that's the Russian general who's in a civilian suit, who was telling me that he's leaning in to tell me how powerful the Russian army is. And I remember smiling at him and telling him that I was a former U.S. Marine, so I know what the best is. The general invited us to his dacha, which is a summer home, winter home, in the case of Siberia. Not many people have dachas, only the most powerful. So this tells you that since this general controlled the gas and oil in the region of Russia, that he would have this house. And not many people have places like that, whether they're high-ranking or not. You could see the dacha on the upper left corner, and in the upper right corner is interesting. Second to the left is a female captain. She's a former KGB agent, and we'll talk about her in a minute. And the left photograph, this is interesting. I'm sitting there at the desk, and the gentleman sitting in front of me with the piece of paper in his hand is my minder. And a minder is somebody that he wouldn't let me out of his sight. And the poor guy, he was telling me in broken English. Well, first few days he pretended he didn't know English, and then somebody asked him a question, and he answered in perfect English. So anyway, he's my minder. I at one point had been going to lunch during lunch the Russians drink vodka. I'm not a drinker. So one day I told him that I was going to go back and get a run in. And he says, I can't do that. And I said, yes, I can. And I went back to my hotel. I put my running gear on and I ran. And my poor minder in his suit had to run with me. I ran 3 miles, and I actually felt sorry for the guy because he wasn't getting paid at this point, or wasn't getting paid much. The photograph to the right is these gentlemen were in our classes, and they are the federal equivalent of the FBI in Russia. And you can see Joe Pistone to the right and to the left peeking out. But anyway, these individuals said, we want to take you to dinner. And they took us to this place and took us down in this basement. And we had a private room. And through the interpreters, they told us that they were taught to think of FBI agents as devils with horns. And we didn't seem to be devils with horns. So they wanted to talk with us. And we had a wonderful dinner with these guys. In fact, they followed us around for the next few days in Siberia. There's a few more photos at the general's dacha. You can see this guy in the white shirt on the left photograph, who was a colonel in the Russian army. He also drank a lot. He would fill his vodka glass up at lunch and drink it. But we're at the dacha, and they had a pool table. And the general says, does anybody play pool? And, I grew up in South Philly. I said, I play pool. And the colonel came up to me and whispered, don't win. He wanted the general to win. And I didn't let the general win. And I let him win 2 out of 3, but he was a terrible pool player. The 2 ladies on the left, the tall blonde was a police captain. And she was a honeypot, which is trying to seduce us. And that's what it's typically called there. But she had not been paid in months. And this is what I'm getting at, that Russia could never sustain a war, a traditional war where they had to occupy, like the Ukraine. They had no money. They weren't paying. Only the top people were getting paid. And the drop off from high-ranking officials to the working class, this police officer captain, she was a former KGB agent, was amazing. And the photograph on in the center right now, if you think about what we're talking about, is, if you remember the map, the Baltic nations of Estonia, Lithuania, and Latvia. You see me sitting in the middle there. The woman behind me is the U.S. ambassador to Estonia. We went over to Estonia, Joe and I. You can see Joe on the left-hand corner below. And the ambassador had us over for a reception. And what the Estonian officials, we stayed there for a week, they hate the Russians. And it's such a farce that Putin is saying that these countries, including the Baltic, Putin has declared he wants to take the Baltic states back because they were in the USSR domain. They showed me the bullet holes and shrapnel holes of buildings in Estonia. They despise the Russians. And Putin is putting this out right now as he attacked Ukraine, that the Baltic states want to rejoin. Nothing could be further than the truth. I want to go back to this photo of me in the upper right-hand corner there. I'm with a Russian major in the Russian army. He was a special ops guy. And I was there as an FBI representative. He could care less that I was an FBI agent. What impressed him is that I was a U.S. Marine. And he told me the awe and that they have for United States Marines. And he showed me an assortment of weapons that they have there in their armory. And it was just amazing. It was just two military guys talking. There was no pretense. He wasn't trying to act tough, and I wasn't trying to refute. It was just amazing, the respect that the Russians have for U.S. Marines. The Russians are big in photographing and giving stuff out. You can see this photo here. I'm to the left of the gentleman in a white shirt and tie, and to the left of me is Joe Pistone. But they treated us well. They fed us well. Of course, they, bagged our rooms every day. They had microphones in our hotel rooms, and they followed us. But we expected that. It was when we went to Estonia, and again, the U.S. ambassador to Estonia, Melissa Wells, is standing behind me. And we had an interesting conversation about the whole relationships between the Baltics and Russia and Germany. Because in 1939, Russia and Nazi Germany, they signed this non-aggression pact, which defined the borders of the Soviet and German spheres, which included Poland and Lithuania, Latvia, Finland, and Estonia. Well, after Hitler lost World War II and, of course, violated the pact, Russia just kept all those states, the Baltics, which included Estonia. But Ambassador Wells, reassured me that the Estonian people, if you look, resemble more Nordic. They're more akin in demeanor and looks to the Scandinavian countries, and they did not like the Germans. So this Putin putting out that these countries want to be retaken by the Soviets is pure BS.
Also fueling Putin's obsession with Ukraine is the events of 1991. Putin, as a young KGB intelligence officer, watched the Berlin Wall crumble, his beloved Soviet Union collapse. Since then, he's been on a mission to return Russia to what he believes is its rightful place on the world stage. The fall of communism at the end of the Cold War saw the former Soviet states turn westward, ditching their Russian rulers and turning to Europe's west and the US to create new economic, political and cultural futures. In 1991, Ukraine gained its independence from the Soviet Union. For 31 years, Ukraine has had its own sovereignty and been an independent country. But that independence hangs in the balance.
Here's the bottom line to this whole invasion of the Ukraine. According to everything that I learned from being around some high-level intel and military officers, Russia is no longer a major military power. They're going bankrupt, and they could never occupy a large country like the Ukraine. Even if he captures the Ukrainians, along with other nations, will mount an insurgency army that will eventually force Russia to withdraw. Putin has underestimated the Ukrainians' patriotism for their country and overestimated any allegiance they may have for Russia. And the bottom line to all this is Putin himself has overplayed his hand and further reduces any illusions of Russia as a major international power. This podcast is being broadcast from outside the gates of Marine Corps Base Camp Lejeune in beautiful North Carolina.